We're going to debunk some of that right here in the very beginning, because people get, the devil, if he's going to attack the Bible, he might as well start right in the very beginning. And he's used guys like C.I. Scofield. And if you get the Scofield Bible, Scofield inserts his trash. He inserts his false doctrine right in between verse 1 and verse 2. I mean, right away, he doesn't waste any time. All right, let me start filling your head with dispensational nonsense. So it says in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Anybody see the gap in there? All right. And if you have a Scofield Bible, right in between verse 1 and 2, you'll have, I forgot what it says. I think it says a gap theory or something right there. And, okay, now, first off, let me say that it is not damnable heresy necessarily to say that there is a gap between verse 1 and verse 2 of this unknown amount of time. But here's the problem I have with that, okay, is if you assume that there is a gap and the Bible says nothing, absolutely nothing about what went on during that gap, that doesn't give you the right to go insert whatever kind of sci-fi nonsense you want in there. This is where they had this pre-Adamic race. This is where the dinosaurs came from. You know, the dinosaurs are millions of years old, like the evolutionists say. It's just they were from before Adam. There was this race of angelic type beings that sinned. They're the ones that built the pyramids and built Stonehenge, and we can go on all these things that man can't explain. Science just can't figure out how they get those stones there in South America so close together you can't even slide a paper in between them. We can't do that type of thing today. Why is that? We haven't got the kind of technology they probably had back then. Back then they had spaceships. They had teleporters. They had all, and you can just go into all kinds of sci-fi nonsense. Folks, even if it's true that there's a gap there, the Bible doesn't tell us about any of that stuff. And yet these guys are going to go, they're going to go preach that kind of nonsense, and people eat it up. That's just wrong. Okay? Listen, if you're all interested in what, how they built Stonehenge and, what it was used for, was it a Stargate? Was it whatever they're teaching, all right, or whatever sci-fi movie you watched. Okay? Then go to the History Channel for that. Don't go to the Bible for these things. Go to the go subscribe to the Sci-Fi Channel on your cable package and go watch it. And don't bring that junk into church. That's just absolute garbage. So, folks, I personally do not believe in the gap theory, or as the Ruckmanites call it, the gap fact. The gap fact. And I'm not going to take the time to go into all the scriptures they use to teach the gap fact, but it's just trash. They have nothing. It's typical Ruckmanite type, methods that they use. I'll look at one verse here in a second, but the reason I don't believe in the gap theory is because you would never get that just from reading Genesis 1. Genesis 1 all by itself, you would never get it. You have to insert that. Somebody has to tell you about it. You'd never get that. But then second of all, I think Exodus chapter 20 verse 11 is pretty clear. I think Exodus chapter 20 verse 11 is trying to, spell out something pretty simple. And it says, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So God made the earth, and in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. And on that first day, the earth was without form. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. The Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Okay? So all these things here that are mentioned in Exodus chapter 20, we all see there right there in the beginning, and it says he did it all in 6 days. So why can't we just take the Bible for what it says? Yeah. Well, how are we going to make a sci-fi movie out of that? Forget your sci-fi movies, okay? Go to your Star Trek convention and dress up like a Klingon or something. Keep that trash out of the church, okay? I get why people are into some of that stuff. It's entertaining, all right? Star Wars, that's entertaining. But it doesn't fit in the Bible. And I almost posted a clip of it a while back, and I didn't. I thought, I should probably talk to the guy first. I should give him a chance. He's not a well-known guy. I just came across, I watch random live streams all the time of services. And I'm watching this guy. I have no idea who he is. He's got to be a Ruckmanite. And he's teaching how there's battles going on in space with principalities. You guys remember Templeton from Charlotte's Web? All right, he sounds exactly like that guy when he talks. And it was just like, are you kidding me? And he's like, he's fighting, we got the first heaven, the sky, and the second heaven, that's, outer space, and the third heaven's where God dwells. Well, where is it where all these principalities are fighting? In the second heaven, in outer space. And he's like, it's pretty scary stuff, isn't it? I'm just thinking, wow. That's passing as preaching today. And it blows my mind. Random live stream, fundamental King James Baptist Church, and I'm just like, what is happening in Baptist churches? This guy, it's like, is Star Wars now real too? Maybe that's just like symbolic of what's going on with the demons and the angels out there. You got the light side fighting the dark side. They've just added lightsabers and things. Folks, it's ridiculous. All right, no wonder churches are going downhill. No wonder things are a mess like they are. But another reason I don't believe in the gap theory too, it's based off of dispensational, retarded cross-references. Okay, now turn over to Jeremiah 4:23. And I bring this up too because, and I'm spending some time on this because I want to teach you some things about studying the Bible that's really important, all right? So you don't make these kind of dumb mistakes. Okay, now Ruckmanites in all dispensations, they love talking about their cross-references, okay? And there is such a thing as cross-references in the Bible where you can go to one place in the Bible and you can go and find another place in the Bible where it's talking about the same thing. Cross-references are real. But in the Ruckmanite world, they tie things together just because the same words are used. They're not talking about the same thing at all. But because the same word is used, they declare it a cross-reference. And so they'll be reading about one subject over here that's really vague, and they'll go somewhere else in the Bible where it's talking about something completely unrelated, but then they'll call it a cross-reference because it's using the same word. And then they go and they mesh these things together and just create weird doctrine from it. That's exactly what they do with Abraham's bosom. When they're teaching the stupidity on that. They use weird cross-references. They never look at the context of passages. And I'm not going to go into everything that Jeremiah 4 here is talking about, but look what it says in verse 23. And I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void. Whoa, where have we seen that before? In the beginning, God created the earth, heaven and the earth. It was without form and void, cross-reference. All right? And the heavens, and they had no light. I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled. And the hills moved lightly. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of heaven were fled. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord, and by his fierce anger. For thus hath the Lord said, the whole land shall be desolate, yet I will not make a full end. Now, what they'll teach with this here is this is talking about, there it's figuratively talking about how, I believe it's Jerusalem God was going to destroy and what it was going to be like. But then they'll say he's referring back to a judgment that was taking place on the pre-Adamic race. And so when we see this passage right here, we're supposed to, this is an example of what it was like in between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. Because the earth was without form and void. And they'll just go back to that. Once again, you read all of Jeremiah, there's absolutely no evidence of that at all. Absolutely none. So you can't just assume that. Now, if you've already decided that there is a gap between Genesis 1 and 1:2, then you can maybe assume that's it. But, folks, there's just no evidence for it. So the thing is, too, the Ruckmanites like to talk about how things that are different are not the same. Well, let's look at a few differences here. So first off, the heavens had no light. Well, I thought the heavens came later. The stars were on the fourth day when those were created. And notice, too, how it mentions the mountains. The land didn't appear until later, until in there too. So all these things it's referring to, the fruitful place was a wilderness. How do you have all these things in an earth with all seed? And what does a race do that's just a planet of water? Okay? And maybe that's where Aquaman comes in, all right? And Atlantis and all that kind of stuff, all right? Maybe that fits with the Bible too. I'm sure there's probably some Ruckmanites out there that teach that. They were like fish people or something, that's where mermaids come from. And but anyway, just so, that kind of thing, it's very frustrating. As somebody who actually studies the Bible and tries to, have some consistency in their teaching, when you see the way people do that, because when I listen to preaching too, one thing that I just naturally do as somebody who puts messages together all the time, I'm constantly figuring out, okay, how did you come to this conclusion? And when I see what they do, I realize just how deceptive it is. It's very dishonest. And it's a lot of garbage, but this type of preaching is meant to make merchandise out of Christians who are just big Star Wars, Lord of the Rings nerds. And they eat it up. They would rather, they want the Bible to have more sci-fi and fantasy type action in it. And so they insert it. And so you have preachers preaching about battles being fought in space with principalities.